31 now. I think. Hello, people. Hello.
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 Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, folks.
Good to see so many. This is wonderful. Absolutely.
How many have we got then, Rachel?
We have 32 at the moment.
32 at the moment. Okay, we're expecting many more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we are expecting a few more. I will keep an eye on the waiting room, but yeah, I think there should be possibly 10 more.
Wonderful.
Fab. So we will be muting everybody because obviously when you've got this many people, you know, in a webinar, it's really difficult to follow how things go. And of course, Zoom picks up on any sound at all. So as soon as the dog barks, then we've had it. So welcome everybody. This is so incredibly exciting to see so many people here. And just to give you a little bit of background before I introduce Mia, Mia and Adam and I are working on a research project developing the EEG work that you all are familiar with. So you've all had a little bit of a listen to some of the work that I've done, and you've all fed into some of the interpretation as well. So that's absolutely brilliant to have all of you here. And Mia is, well, she's going to introduce herself in a moment, but she's an SF consultant based just outside of Copenhagen in Denmark. So Mia, whenever you're ready. Oh, and questions please in the chat box. And we will break for questions throughout. We've got a couple of opening questions to ask her, and then just pop your questions in and we'll see how this talk goes. So Mia, lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure.
Hi. Yes. Shall I just give it a go? So I'm Mia, and I am called a social consultant in a little private company just outside Copenhagen. And our primary work is to deliver a solution-focused support work in families at risk, primarily high-risk families, so to ensure safety guarding for children in the homes, but also to go and our kind of main role is to look for the resources so we can avoid more children being put into care. So we get brought in by the social work departments in the councils, around the city center of Copenhagen, and we can either be an emergency, do emergency work where we get called in on the very same day where the child might be at the police station being interrogated about whatever accusations of violence in the home or something, or we can start up on a case that is already kind of settled in the social work department and they want to do a long-term piece of work with this specific family. So we do the whole range of family work. Aside to that, we do free counseling, 1 day a month, solution-focused counseling, and I do teaching as well. Teaching solution-focused family work to professionals in the whole of Denmark. It's a very new method approach in Denmark, so it's growing, but it's growing very fast, and particularly through the social work departments due to the whole signs of safety movement that's come across the whole world. It's picking up here too. And within business as well, it's picking up. So we're lucky to be some of the first movers in the country, which is incredible and amazing. And the company, we only work solution focused, which also means that when we have staff meetings, when we eat lunch together, we only do solution-focused talking with each other. So we're geeks, we're nerding out, and we love it. You know, that's the benefit of being a private company. We can choose to work in the very specific way we want to work, and we're not caught up by ideas from above of how you should be delivering work. So yes, and I think that we are one of the only companies in the world at the moment where the whole organization is working solution focused also within staff meetings. We're fortunate to have a group of people. There's a lot of good practitioners around the world doing family work, solution focused family work, but we also do it within our staff group all the time. So yes. So what I do is that I do work in the homes, so I can come in a family 3, 4, 5 times a week. Can also just be one conversation with a parent a week, but we do that solution focused, even though we might be in the family 3 hours in a row, or we come in the morning, we come back in the afternoon, we come back in the evening. We do exactly the same every single time. We do a structured solution focused conversation that can range between 15 minutes and 3 hours. Yeah, so. Yes.
That's quite different, I think, to the way that most of us work who are watching this, because we have a client, they turn up for an hour, they go home, we see them a week later. Yeah. So your way of working is much more immersive. You're really there in the families' lives.
One of our kind of main aims is to be there when it makes sense to be there. So if we need to work with setting up, routines around sleeping, eating, anything like that, we are there at that time of day, evening, morning, night, which is quite unique. So we're a good supplement to the family support workers the councils already have, but most of them often work from 8 till 4 or 9 till 5. But our best hope is that that's when the kids are in school, and if possible, the parents are at work. So it does not make sense for us to come at that time. Mm. So we are there when they are together, because that's where we can do hands-on coaching, guiding. Yes.
Mm. Yeah. And I think, that is really significant, because so many of us, we work with the child, the adult, but we don't get to work with them together.
Mm. Yeah, and that's, sometimes we start off cases the same way, but our main goal is to bring them together so they develop their family life together and interact with each other in very different ways. And we can only, in the solution focused language, we cannot make judgments on how we think people do with each other. So we need to see how they do with each other, because it's not fair that I, as a practitioner, imagine and pass on information to the social work department about what I think they do. I need to see how they do it. Yeah. And it's a good balance of supporting the parent, but also supporting the child in the here and now, to communicate with their parents, or to be heard by the parents, or even to conflict management with the parents, or help the parent to conflict manage their child. So it's like a dance. I see it a bit like I'm dancing with the family while I'm there with them, and inviting them all the time to take part and participate in creating changes at home. I have to tell parents sometimes that what they're doing right now is not okay and they need to stop. And immediately, as soon as I've done that, I invite them to help come up with the good solutions of how they can, create peace in the home here and now immediately. So, and that's how we get the solution focused angle into the telling off bit, because telling off is obviously not solution focused, but I think if you invite them to create the solution straight after, then I truly believe it is. So, yeah.
And how are you finding it during the pandemic? Are you still able to go into homes? Are you able to work differently?
We've still been in some homes, and other families we've decided to do it online, and it's worked really well. We've had to kind of look at safety measures and how much safety do we have to create for the children. But it's only been a few where we've decided we had to turn up because it was not safe enough for the kids to be at home without any people coming around. But a lot of families, it's managed really well to do the work online instead. I've got colleagues who've been been with families for hours, and the family's been doing activities, and my colleague has been online, but they've been able to communicate and participate almost as if they were in the room together, which is really amazing. Children as well has worked. They love being online. They love, they do this telephone thing much better than we do. So yeah, it's not been an issue. On the contrary, actually, it's worked really well.
And so would you still spend sort of 3-4 hours with the family online?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What are you looking to achieve? Do you take each person separately? Are you still looking for interaction within the family? How do you do it?
It demands a bit more planning with the family, but I think that's a good thing. Invite them to, how can we continue working with each other with these things that the social work department wants to see, and invite them to, how will we do that? And a lot of them had tablets, so the tablet's been put somewhere in the room, and then they've continued doing their thing, and we've been talking to them through that media and they've looked at us. Other times we've had children going to their room, taking the tablet with them, and we've been together with them there. Yeah, it's almost as if I was there. But I think it's made a difference that we invited them to find out how can we do this now? Because we have to still work with you because the worries are still there. So how can we do that? We give them the ownership to make decisions about how they can show development to the social work department through me, if that makes sense. So
I think it's extraordinary, the work that you do, and to be able to work with the family as a whole and to see the interactions, people, and to really, and actually to be able to stand up and say, this isn't okay, how are you going to do it better? Because that is part of your role, isn't it? To tell people that it's not okay.
It is. So I kind of juggle between guiding. Sometimes I will give advice of where they can find information about, who at the council do they have to contact with a specific question or whatever. So ranging from that to guiding to almost, we call it shadow coaching, so that they can choose, I can go right next to them or right behind them, and we do things together, or I might take a step forward, do something with the child, step back, let the parent take over. So going in and out of many roles during a visit like that, and also paying attention to my impact on what's happening and taking a step back to allow them to show how they are interacting with each other. Yeah, that's why I said it's like a dance. I'm going in and out of many positions during a visit in a home. But I have to step forward sometimes and say, this is not okay. And I have to do that in other people's private homes, which takes a bit of learning and practice to do. But they seem to be okay with it. Okay. I think the difference is that you invite them to participate in finding the right solutions straight after that I've told them that they need to change their behavior. I have never had parents turning back on me and going into an argument with me about a situation like that ever, actually. So
that's interesting.
Yes. Interesting. And I'm definite it boils down to the language we choose to use when we're working with them. I don't question that at all. Because I might be an expert in we say a good enough child's life, because what's a good child's life? Nobody can define what that is, but I know what's the basics that needs to be there. So that's my role. I'm an expert in that, but I'm not an expert in their family at all. They are. And I'm not an expert in their child. They are. So I need them to help me understand them better and help them better, support them better. So, yeah.
You say that you use solution-focused language from I guess the minute that the office opens to the minute it closes, and probably afterwards as well. But do you use the best hopes question when you're talking about the families kind of before you go visit them? Do you use the words that we use in your meetings?
Yes, we do. We start all meetings with best hopes. So staff meetings, supervisions. So what's your best hope from the visit that we're going into right now? When we have time to do that, we call each other while we're driving to the families. If I've got time and I know a colleague is on her way, I would call her and ask, so what's your best hope from the visit that you're going into? What are you hoping they will notice about you? It's a really good way to talk each other into the visit that we're going into. When we go into a family, we use the best hopes question as well. And what we do, and this is not straightforward, like structured conversation, but we do what's better, but we also do what's best in the same session. Because the what's better is about changing, changing the view on their life and noticing small things working. But the best hopes question is about them and us tuning into what are we here to work with at this for the next 2 hours or 3 hours. So what are you hoping from this specific little amount of time? Because that will help me support them better, but it will also kind of maintain the focus that we have. Because often, I've got families where I've been coming for 4 years, which means they know me very well, I know them very well, and it could easily be very cozy and nice, and we can sit and chat for a few hours, but that's not what I'm there for. And I should only be there if there's a purpose, and and the best hopes question helps me create a purpose for the visit and helps me stick to what I'm there for. I'm not their friend. I'm going to leave again. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. There's a few questions starting to stack up in the chat, but I'm the host, so I get to go first. So what is the difference between the way that you work with the families and the way that other agencies work? Because you're not the only agency in Denmark that works with these families, is that right?
There's loads of people working with families.
Yeah. So what do you know is the difference, if you like, with the families that you're working with? The outcomes for these families, are they more likely to be intact families at the end? What's the difference?
The primary difference is that the beginning, the development goes slower. Because we are inviting them, we're changing their language. So we are inviting them to give us the answers about their family. So initially, the signs of development will go slower compared to work I've done before I was entirely solution focused, where you go and tell them what they should be doing, then they will perform and do that for 2 weeks, maybe a month, and then the development curve goes down again. But what I see is that when we work solution focused, we're inviting them to facilitate the changes themselves and get their experiences internalized in their own systems. But we do see that the amount of development that happens over the amount of time we are in a family is bigger. And what do you call that? The relapse rate, can you say that?
Yeah.
Is much lower than other ways of doing family support work.
Okay. So the effects are more likely to last longer?
Absolutely.
These families?
Because they learn by doing. It's learning by doing. It's not learning by listening to a professional telling them what to do, but learning by doing it themselves with the support, So sometimes it's 4 steps forward and 3 steps back or 5 steps back, but that's okay. I know that's part of the process. And once the families find peace in the fact that even though they have a relapse or something happens that causes a lot of trauma again, it's okay. It's part of life. So it's a different path and pace, but the long-term effect is much more sustainable than an approach where you go and tell them what to do and then you leave again. Yeah.
Wonderful. So Lisa and Izzy are managing questions at the moment. Do either of you have any interesting questions to pose to Mia?
Yeah, there are a few comments and questions. Angela Brown, just comment on what you're saying about the way you're working with families. Angela says, this is interesting as she often thinks the parents and children overlap. They're almost intrinsically linked in some cases. Judy Fitzsimmons asked about where your introduction to solution focus came from.
Well, I think to be honest, I have been surrounded by really amazing role models throughout my career and my studies, and none of them have known that they were doing solution-focused work, but they've had a solution-focused mindset. And one of them is called Pia, who's the one who's got the company I work for now. And I met her when I was doing 1997. I think she was my supervisor when I was on placement during my community education course. I think it's called ComEd in England, isn't it? And then I worked for years in Edinburgh and Scotland, and there was a woman called Dot Horn doing Edinburgh City Youth Cafe, and she had the same mindset, this thing of giving the ownership to the people they were working with, and not putting your own judgment on people, but inviting people in to be active in their lives. And then when I started, I met up with Pia again 7 years ago. And we had to work together again. And she got introduced at Brief. She found Chris Iverson, and she took me to Brief, and that was it. That was me. It fitted. There was a theory that fitted my way of looking at people as well, I think, and that just made a difference to my work from then on. I'd spent many years trying to grab things from different ways of working and trying to put it into my own, but getting so frustrated and really dragged down by the responsibility I felt to create change in other people. And this has just made a difference. I could not have done the work that I do now if I did not have one way of working with people and it being solution focused, because it would be too hard. I would take too much back with me home when I left work every day, but I don't do that now the same way. So, yeah. And it's become a way of life. It's, I can't do this a whole day at work and not apply it to my life. So my whole family is bogged into this now.
Can we just have the name of that lady in Edinburgh again, please? Yeah.
Dot Horn.
Dot Horn.
She runs the Edinburgh City Youth Cafe.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It does become a way of life, doesn't it?
It does. It does. We just got a new colleague, and Pia and I had a meeting with her today, and it was just you won't survive in this work, in this company, if you don't apply it to yourself. And suddenly you find yourself, you're not able to moan about other people. You can't do that anymore, because you do that for 1 minute and you start going, okay, so what might their good reasons be to do this right now? Or what might be my good reason to sit and do this now? So, it has a ripple effect on everything. And I think you just become a more happy person. And I have to say, we see that in the families as well. Once they start believing that we're real and we're giving them acknowledgement that is honest, and that they actually have a voice, amazing change happens. They take so much more ownership. They suddenly present themselves differently at the social work department. They present themselves differently in the daycare, you know, and then people around them will start responding differently to them as parents. And then it starts growing, which is absolutely beautiful to see when that happens. It takes about 3 months. And then that's when they start changing their mindset. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say, there's a question from Lena, and that sort of fits into what you've just been saying, because she's asking, and you've answered it a little bit just then, how do you manage to be both the expert at times, but still making them feel that they're the expert in their own lives? And also, does it get confused sometimes, and do they end up asking you for advice rather than trying to work it out for themselves?
I don't find it gets confusing to me, because I'm very aware of what is expert knowledge. So, you know, child development, paths in the system to get wherever. That's where I have my skills, but I don't know their child. So my kind of expert knowledge is very kind of broad, where their knowledge is very narrow and specific. And I think that I have that in the back of my mind all the time. What I do, but can you ask the last bit of the question again, Lisa?
Is there a confusion sometimes that they start asking you for advice rather than working it out for themselves?
Quite often when we start up a new family, they are expecting me to tell them what to do, because that's the way the system is right now, and that's what they're used to. So most of the families do that. And then it's a question of me sticking to my guns and giving it back to them, asking what difference it would what difference it would make for them to get the advice, what they've already got. And again, once they start getting to know my language, they stop asking for specific pieces of advice or of how I think they should be doing things. But they will always ask from the beginning, because that's what they're used to, being told what to do. Yeah, and I experience a lot of parents have lost a lot of confidence in their own skills because they've been judged or they've been told off by authorities that you're not good enough at doing this or looking after your child. So they need to get this kind of self-confidence built up again, and then they start participating and realizing that they are experts themselves already, but they don't know that when we start. So yes, they do ask for advice all the time to begin with. And that's the most difficult, I think the most difficult learning curve it has been for me to work solution focused, is to not fall into old habits of telling people what to do. Because I could, I have a huge rucksack of experience and ways of planning an evening with a child. I've got children myself, which makes it even more difficult to not share all my good experiences, but they can't use my experiences to anything. It's just words. It's got nothing, they can't, they have to do it themselves. So, was that an answer to the question?
I think so. They can, Lena will come back, I would think, if she wants some more. That sort of leads into one of my questions. I saw one of your other videos, and I know that one of your best hopes is keeping the family together. And I've done a little bit of work myself with people with complex needs, and I know that there's heightened emotions when children are going to be separated from the parents. And I've looked at it from the parent perspective, and that they're not the best versions of themselves when somebody's threatening to take their children away. So how does solution focus help dampen the emotions, if you like, so that they can become a better version of themselves during that heightened trauma of threatening children being taken away from them?
It's a good question. I think there's a very simple answer to that. which is the fact that they're being listened to and taken seriously. It makes a big difference. But it does take a long time for them to find, or the emotions to go down. So it takes a lot of listening, and you have to hear the same stories, but every time, once you start looking into the resilience, also being frank about what's happening. So if there's a threat that this child might have to be taken into care, I will address that. I will talk openly about it, and I will ask them directly about, so how could the good way of this happening be? Suppose it was to be happening. And I think that's a thing that I'm very proud of that we do, is that we're not afraid to talk about these things that are awful and horrific. But we're not talking about, we're acknowledging that it's difficult, but our main focus is to look at, so if a child, if the social work department has decided to put the child into care, and this does happen in some of our cases, how can we make sure that this becomes the best placement of this child as possible? So we start talking with the parents about, so how often would be good for you and the child to see each other, under what circumstances, so. And even if it doesn't happen that the child gets put into care, just by talking about these things creates some form of different kind of accept in the parents. But the listening, I think the listening and being taken serious and not fueling the drama, but working with what's here and now makes a big difference. And we've got this aim to create a partnership between us, the family, but also the social work department. So we do our very best to invite the parents or the family to use a social worker, because they are their person. The social work department is not there to be their enemy, but it takes time. It takes a while for them to change their mindset about the social work department. But once it happens, good stuff comes out of that, even though it can mean that a child needs to be put into care. Yeah.
Just linking a little bit to that, I've done a little bit of research into trauma-informed care and looking at what's happened as opposed to what's going on with you now. And you sort of touched on it a little bit then. How do you, and you talked about the trauma that might have happened before. How do you sort of, how does that flow so that you acknowledge the trauma, but you then move into a solution-focused approach?
But I think solution-focused work, also talking about the past, but highlighting how did you get through that last time? Right. So pulling out the resources and looking at the resilience that they've gained throughout the trauma that they might have been through or through life. So I think we do that, even though we do solution-focused work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm just comparing the approaches because they both believe the client's the expert. So, and they both let the client lead the way to a certain extent. So it was just, how did you cope in the past? That's my answer. Thank you. Izzy, do you want to pick up on those other questions?
Yeah. So. Paul Hutchins asked, does the service user decide how frequently and how many times they see you?
No, the authorities do that. There are very few, I've studied very few cases where the clients themselves have, we've got, I think, right now we don't have any private clients coming to us. It does happen once in a while, but it's not, that's more luxury than anything else. But there are a few times that clients might have turned up at the social work department and said, I need help right now. And I think they've done an assessment of their needs already themselves. But 99.9% of our families, the social work department decides how many hours, and they use us as well, because we've gained a lot of experience now, so we can quite quickly assess what we think the need is, and we always ensure that we can turn it up or turn it down. So it's mobile all the time and fluid. It's fluid. That's the right word for it. No, the cases that we get are the ones that often the ones that the social work department finds difficult to deal with themselves, but they still believe in the family, but they don't have the capacity to work the amount of hours or the hours that we work with their own family support workers.
So linked to that, how does that? How do you find that the way that you work with social services and with the community, the council, family workers, support workers? How does that play out? And is there any conflict ever, or does that kind of work quite smoothly?
It generally works out okay. Often the times where we come in to a family where there's been a support worker before is because they've acknowledged that this family needs more support. And I mean, and the way that the family support work teams and the councils here anyway are structured, they don't work in teams, so they work alone. And you can only have a certain amount of caseload being working alone, and we don't work alone. I've always got at least one other person on my team. So if I'm ill, I'm on holiday, there will be a known face that will come and visit the family, and we will, you know, we can, depending on the size of the case, sometimes if we have to be there for every single day or several hours every single day, you can't do that if you're just yourself. You need to be a good amount of people. So often it's positive. Often these family support workers from the councils will say this family needs more, so it's okay to pass on the family. There's been a few times where we've been kind of going in on holidays and working with a family for 2 weeks because the support workers from the council they had to go on holiday. And there's been a few issues there because we work in a very different way. So sometimes they don't understand our language. They think we're too positive. They can get confused because we're not problem focused. But most of the time it works well because a lot of the social workers that choose us as a provider, they choose us because we work the way we do. So they're okay with the fact that a family support worker who's problem focused doesn't agree with us. The social work department finds peace with that and says that's fine. Yeah.
I wonder if I can ask you, Mia, about language, because in solution-focused practice, language is enormously important. And in part of our discussions, we talked about the difference between English and Danish. And do you deliver your work in English or in Danish or both? And what's the difference?
I'm happy that I can deliver in both. So with the Danish families, obviously I speak Danish, but I love going into families from different cultures because I can speak English, because the English language, the solution-focused English language is so much more nuanced and detailed. The Danish language is very poor. We don't have as many expressions for a specific feeling like you do in England or in English. So I enjoy asking the best hopes question in English a lot because it doesn't have the same effect in Danish.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just the word hope even is very American. You know, over here they're going, oh, what's that? Fluffy, Americanized. Who talks about hope and the best version of yourself? Sorry, Adam. But it is looked upon as a very Americanized way of thinking, you know, because it's a law here. It's not law, legal law, but it's called the Yante law, which is like 9 points stating, amongst others, that you should not think that you're better than anyone else. It's very, very heavy and looking down on yourself. So coming in asking the best version of yourself or what are your best hopes, imagine this happened tomorrow, so maybe we need to work a lot harder to begin with in families, because we need to change, they need to learn a new language when we get in. I'm sure you have the same experiences in English, but it's just the Danish language, just much more poor. It's not nuanced at all.
Yeah, because it is an interesting conversation to start with a new client, because often they come to us with expectations of how we're going to work. And perhaps none of us had really considered how fortunate we are to be delivering this in English, that we do have those nuances, that we do have those words that respond well to the solution-focused approach. But you've managed to, or excelled at making it work within the Danish language. It's just that first session, is it? Or that's difficult?
Can you see my screen? Can you see me?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yep, we can see you.
I've lost you guys. Hang on a second. There you go. Can you just ask the other one, Rachel?
Well, it was just an observation, really, that we're so fortunate speaking English, that we work with clients in English, that we have those nuances available to us.
I think one of our downfalls in Move1 and the other people in Denmark who are very dedicated to solution-focused language is that we try to get the best translation as possible that gets the closest to the English solution-focused language as possible. So I'm sure we could make our lives much more easy if we just chose a kind of almost good enough best hopes question, but we don't go with that. Our biggest problem is translating the what's better question. Actually, best hopes can work, but what's better, we have not found the right question yet. And there's a big discussion in the Danish SF community because there's so many kind of cultural things that's being applied onto, there's a lot of hope and good energy in asking the best hopes question in English, but when you ask it translated directly in Danish, you indicate that there's a problem. And so it's difficult. How can we, So we're inventing a new Danish language as well. Sentences that you would not normally say in Danish, we say. And then when we continue to do that, suddenly other people start saying them as well. And then suddenly we've created a new Danish way of saying things. So that's what we're doing quite a lot of the time, to be honest. Yeah.
On that note, Dorothy has put a quote from somebody, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Wittgenstein said, "The limits of language mean the limits of my world." That's from Dorothea. And also Hazel's asked, she's noted you've worked in Scotland and Denmark, and we've touched on language, but are there any other cultural differences that make the work different?
A big one is that we don't have a third sector over here. So the whole voluntary sector does not exist here. So my experience from the UK is that there's a lot more creative work going on around in little pockets. And that's just fairly new coming up over here. I mean, it was a big hoo-ha just 5 years ago that we were a private company doing work with people, because that was seen upon as, that was business, and people are not business. It's slowly changing and we're getting a bigger voluntary sector here, but it's still not applied. So the creative work has been happening in private, residential care homes and stuff. They've been able to play with different approaches, but otherwise it's been state-led, and that has caused a lot of stiffness. I don't know, what would you call that? People, I mean, that's why Pia decided to break out of that and start her own, because she could not, she could not work within those remits. She wanted to be much more creative and meeting people in a specific way, and the way that it was directed for them to meet young people in the place she worked was not good for her. I've been fortunate enough that I've not had to work within do council work in Denmark. So I grew up young adult in Scotland, so I learned it the creative way. So and I can't go back. I know that I'm too damaged by being allowed to work creatively with people now. So, but that makes a big difference, and I think that's why the solution-focused approach is not big here yet. Is that there's not enough places where creativity is allowed to be brought in. It's still linked to kind of old methods, and the whole kind of what's that called? The psychiatry part here is still very old school, I would say. But let's say, I think in 10 years, it will be a very different picture over here. So yeah, I think we're behind a little bit with that.
Can I just ask, linking to what you've just said, what are your best hopes then for in 10 years' time? And what's your first step to getting towards those best hopes?
My best hope is that we will see a lot more solution-focused family work. We will see solution focus being part of what they're being taught at the social work in different education systems. So, well, kind of the social care side of education, solution focus will be part of their classes in, I don't know, psychology or whatever, because that would mean that we would get more people out from mainstream education, further education, that would be aware of this mindset, and that will slowly drizzle out. It will become more mainstream. That's my best hope for in 10 years. And I think we are, and the other people in Denmark who are working really hard on spreading the word around SF are doing the first step already, which is absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you. And Julie asked exactly the same question at the same time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we've one question from Judy. You've mentioned a few of the challenges that you're facing at the moment with language and kind of how things are slowed down by the involvement the state. What would you, Judy would like to know, what do you find most challenging about
my work, or
about your role?
About my role in families, or?
Judy hasn't specified, so take it as you will, I guess.
I think on a personal level, what's most challenging for me in my role is that to slow down pace, and to remember to constantly remind myself of not, starting a new conversation with a family around a new theme, slow down, because development takes a long time. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, because I'm curious. I'm so curious that I can't help myself sometimes continue asking questions, and I need to be aware of stopping myself and saying, we'll stop now, and then give them time to work with that. I think that's my biggest challenge, actually. Yeah.
Can I just ask, is there a case that you'd like to share with us, like one of your wow cases that really uplifted you and you wondered how and if you got to that point?
Oh, I think well, we've got, I mean, there's loads, because it depends on what little thing around a specific case that you guys find interesting. But we've there's a case that I've been part of for 6 years now, and Pia started it off before me, so I think we've known them for 9 years, which is not very brief. It's many years, but that's a piece of work that is the evidence of what a good partnership between the social work department, the family, and us can do, and also the other professional school teachers, the psychologist that's connected to the childcare providers. We've got a system here where the psychologist linked to them. The partnership has made. There was one social worker that believed that a father in this family had a skill. There was potential in this father. It was a hoarder home. Is it called a hoarder? You know, people who hoard. And a mom with paranoid schizophrenia. They were from Africa, and 3 children. And there's, this amount of garbage all over the house when we came. 2 children had been born and raised for 2 years, locked up in a room with their ill mother. And the father was much older. And today, this is a family where a month ago, I was at the last school home meeting with the middle child, and he's now in normal school. There's no worries about him anymore. The father's living with the children at home. We've had the honor of helping him learn every single little skill, because culturally he's not been taught how to look after little children. So that the smallest one was a year when we got to know the family. I think that's a family that will stay with me for the rest of my life, just because they wanted to work to be part of this partnership as well. So everyone benefited from each other, and I think when I start a new case, that's always what I aspire to. Because the partnership can make the biggest difference in the development, because we need everyone to be part of what's happening, because otherwise you won't achieve as much as you can. But it's we've got so many different cases, it's difficult to answer. I can speak for hours about crazy mental things I've experienced, but yeah. I don't know what you want. You get to see everything, you know. But I think what keeps me going is that, you know, we get a lot of written stuff about the families to begin with, but I don't read it, you know. I go and visit them, and I can see them several times before I read the papers. I only need to know what safety measures I need to be aware of regarding the child, but I don't want to know everything else about the parents to begin with, because it just colors my mind. And when I read, I'm aware to read in a solution-focused way, because otherwise I will judge them the way that they've been judged for many, many years already, probably. So, yeah, I love that. I love that I'm in the position where I can read about the monster, but I can see the human behind, because I'm in their homes for that many hours. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful place to kind of bring this webinar to a close. I know there's still other comments in there, but I think that last statement was absolutely powerful. Beautiful sentiment, Mia. That was really something.
And I think Sally Potter agrees.
Yes, certainly.
Wow, that makes my heart sing. So, love that description from Joanna Walsh. Yeah, so insane.
Really, really nice. I hope that's given everybody an introduction to the use of solution-focused practice in a very different arena to the one that perhaps most of us work in. Lots and lots of lovely thank you messages coming in now into the chat box, which, you know, just shows how touched people have been by everything you've mentioned today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And those of you who are here today get advance notice of our next webinar, which is very exciting. Save the date announcement goes out right now. And I'm going to double check it on my phone before I hand it out. It is Wednesday, I'm back in November. Let's have a look. The 16th of December at 6 p.m. with the amazing Adam. He's still on mute. Unmute him, Dorothea.
Indeed, I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And everybody who's here today, ping an email over to me to tell me that you'll be there, and you will have first dibs on attending Adam's webinar. And I know this is going to be a popular one, but you guys get in first, okay? So,
me. I'll be there, me.
And Lisa and Izzy will be there as well. And I'll be there. May will be there if she can make time in her diary. We'll see. You will, I know. Thank you so much, Mia, again. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm just going to